William had always been meticulous. As an IT professional, his job demanded attention to detail, problem-solving, and the ability to see through complexities. But tonight, no amount of logic could prepare him for what he was about to hear. It was just past 9 p.m. The house was dimly lit, the only light coming from the living room. As he stepped into the hallway, he heard Isabella's voice, low but animated. "He actually believes the baby's his," she said, laughing softly. William froze. His hand instinctively rested on the wall for balance. "Isabella," Madison's voice followed. "How clueless can one man be? That loser is like our personal ATM." William's stomach tightened. He blinked, trying to process the words. Were they joking? Some cruel misunderstanding? But as Isabella's laugh grew louder, it became clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. And the best part? Isabella continued. "That college fund he's so proud of? Oh, honey, I can't wait for this to be over. The wedding will be perfect. Me and Dylan, living the life we've always wanted. Divorce papers signed, assets split, and we're free." He has no idea. William leaned into the wall. The shadows of his wife and stepdaughter danced on the living room walls, their silhouettes flickering with every shift of the conversation. His ears buzzed. Isabella's words, "me and Dylan," played on a loop in his head. He tried to steady his breathing. His hands shook. They weren't just betraying him. They were mocking him, mocking his sacrifices, his love, his trust. Madison's voice broke his thoughts. "So, when's the wedding with Dylan anyway? Does he know William's still in the dark?" "Oh, Dylan knows. He's been so patient about all this," Isabella replied, her voice filled with admiration. "He keeps saying soon, baby. Just finish it, and I will. I've had enough of playing the perfect wife. I want my freedom." William's heart felt like it was being torn apart, piece by piece. He thought of all the late nights he'd worked overtime to provide for them, the years of listening to Isabella's complaints about her struggles, the countless fatherly talks he'd had with Madison about her future. Madison snickered. "Well, freedom's going to cost you, Mom. Do you think you can actually squeeze more out of him before you drop the bomb?" Isabella responded with a smug tone. "Oh, William's a sentimental fool. He won't see it coming until it's too late. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. I'll be crying, acting the victim, and he'll just hand me what I want." The sound of their laughter hit William like a slap. His jaw tightened. He clenched his fists so hard his nails dug into his palms. For a moment, he debated confronting them. He imagined storming into the room, demanding answers, letting his rage boil over. But he stopped himself. No, that would only tip them off. He needed to be smarter. Slowly, he backed away from the doorway, careful not to make a sound. Each step away from the living room felt heavier. His feet carried him upstairs to his home office, the one place he thought of as a sanctuary. He shut the door quietly behind him and leaned against it. His mind raced. His hands trembled as he sat down at his desk. The monitor screen glowed in front of him, the familiar icons doing little to calm him. "This isn't happening," he whispered, staring blankly at the screen. William shut his laptop, stood, and began pacing the room. His chest heaved with every breath. The walls seemed to close in on him. Every memory of his marriage replayed in his mind. The day they bought their home, Isabella's tears of joy when she announced her pregnancy, the promises they had made to build a future together. It was all a lie. He ran a hand through his hair, gripping it tightly at the roots. "How long has this been going on?" he muttered to himself. "Dylan the baby, Madison too? They've all been laughing at me this whole time." His anger began to focus, solidifying into something sharper. This wasn't just betrayal. It was mockery. They had taken him for a fool, and now they were planning to discard him like trash. William's phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. A message from Isabella lit up the screen. "Hey, Han, don't wait up for me tonight. Gonna watch a movie with Madison. Love you." He stared at the message, ball rising in his throat. "Love you," she said. Those words, so casual and hollow, felt like a dagger. He typed a curt reply. "Okay." Setting the phone down, William began to plan. He pulled out a notebook and started jotting down thoughts, ideas, possibilities. If they were going to play dirty, So would he. He logged back into the banking app and transferred every penny from their joint account into his personal savings. His finger hovered over the confirmation button for a moment. Then he pressed it. Gone. Next, he opened the account for Madison's college fund. The thought of her laughter earlier, mocking him, gave him all the resolve he needed. With a few clicks, he canceled the account. William leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. His hands were steady now, his mind sharper. The initial shock had passed, replaced by a cold determination. He would gather evidence. He would protect what was his. And when the time came, he would strike. Downstairs, Isabella and Madison's laughter continued. William listened for a moment, his face blank. He reached for the drawer of his desk and pulled out the folder containing the deed to the house, flipping through the papers. His name alone was on it. Good, he murmured. The sound of footsteps brought him back to the present. Isabella's voice called from the bottom of the stairs. William, are you still up? His jaw clenched. Yeah, just finishing up some work? Okay, Isabella replied. Don't work too hard, babe. The sound of her retreating footsteps made his stomach churn. He sat there in silence for a moment before pulling out his phone again. This time he searched for lawyers. By the time William finally went to bed that night, Isabella was already asleep, her back turned to him. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying every word he had overheard. There would be no confrontation. Not yet. He would bide his time, gathering everything he needed to ensure they couldn't hurt him any further. As the house fell silent, William whispered to himself, they have no idea who they're dealing with. The smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen the next morning. William sat at the table, staring blankly at his plate of scrambled eggs. His hands rested flat on the table, his knuckles white from the tension he held in. Across from him, Isabella leaned against the counter, nursing her coffee and scrolling through her phone. Madison was next to her, flicking through college brochures, her face scrunched in mock frustration. Why do all these colleges want so many essays? Madison said, groaning. Do they think we don't have lives or something? William took a sip of his coffee, keeping his eyes fixed on his plate. His mind was elsewhere, on the plans he had begun crafting the night before. Isabella set her phone down and turned to him. You're quiet this morning, William, she said, tilting her head. Everything okay? William forced a small smile, meeting her gaze. Just tired from the trip. You know how those meetings drain me? She nodded sympathetically, her voice softening. Poor baby. Maybe take it easy today? You work so hard. Madison rolled her eyes. Yeah, Dad. Relax, or whatever. I've got enough stress for all of us, trying to figure out how to get into these overpriced schools. William clenched his teeth, but said nothing. He reached for his coffee again, the bitterness of the drink matching the bitterness boiling inside him. The absurdity of the moment wasn't lost on him. Here they were, the two people who had mocked and betrayed him, acting as though everything was normal. Isabella's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. So, I'm thinking of heading to the mall later, she said, glancing at Madison. We could check out that new boutique. Maybe grab lunch. You want to come? Madison shrugged. Sure, as long as you're paying. William stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the tile floor. I've got a lot of work to do today, he said, his tone neutral. You two go ahead. Isabella raised an eyebrow, but didn't press him. All right, suit yourself. As he walked out of the kitchen, he heard Isabella say something under her breath to Madison, followed by their shared laughter. He didn't bother to ask what the joke was. He knew it would only make his anger worse. That night, William waited until the house was silent. Isabella had gone to bed after her usual routine of scrolling through social media and texting whoever he assumed was Dylan. Madison was in her room, likely on a video call with her friends. William sat in his home office, the glow of his laptop illuminating his face. His heart pounded as he opened the banking app, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. This was the first real move, the first tangible step toward dismantling their carefully crafted plans. He logged into the joint account. The numbers stared back at him, a culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. Isabella had always been insistent about keeping their finances shared. At the time, he thought it was a sign of trust. Now he saw it for what it was, her way of keeping control. With a few clicks, he initiated the transfer. Every dollar from the joint account flowed into his personal savings. The confirmation screen popped up. Transfer complete. Next, he turned to Madison's college fund. He paused for a moment, his finger hovering over the cancel button. He thought of the countless conversations they'd had about her future. He had supported her dreams, encouraged her, even sacrificed vacations and personal luxuries to build that fund. And then he remembered her laughter. That loser is like our personal ATM. With a sharp exhale, he clicked the button. The account balance dropped to 0. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. They don't deserve it, he muttered. His phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen and saw Isabella's name. A text popped up. "Good night, love. Don't stay up too late." William stared at the message, his jaw tightening. He typed a quick reply, "Good night." He placed the phone face down on the desk and pulled up a new tab on his browser. It was time to find a lawyer. The next morning, William sat in a sleek downtown office, the air smelling faintly of leather and polished wood. Across from him sat a sharp-dressed man in his mid-40s, the kind of lawyer who radiated confidence. "So," the lawyer said, leaning forward, "you're looking to file for divorce and protect your assets?" William nodded, his expression unreadable. "I need this done quickly and quietly. My wife doesn't know yet, and I want to keep it that way until everything is in place." The lawyer jotted down notes. "Do you have any proof of infidelity or financial manipulation? Anything that might help us secure a favorable outcome?" William's jaw tightened. "Not yet, but I overheard her and my stepdaughter talking last night. They've been planning this for months, draining me, mocking me. There's another man, Dylan. She's been cheating on me with him. The baby she's carrying, I'm almost certain it isn't mine." The lawyer nodded. "If we can prove that, it'll make your case much stronger. I'd recommend getting a paternity test as soon as possible." "I've already thought about that," William said, "and I've started securing my finances. The joint accounts are empty. The college fund is canceled." The lawyer raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Good. That gives us leverage. But you'll need to stay careful. If she catches wind of what you're doing, she might try to retaliate." "She won't," William said firmly. The lawyer leaned back in his chair. "All right. I'll draft the divorce papers and start the process of securing your assets. We'll also gather evidence of her infidelity. This will take some time, but if you're prepared, we can make sure she walks away with as little as possible." William nodded, his resolve solidifying. "Do whatever it takes." That evening, William returned home, his face calm, but his mind buzzing with the plans he had set into motion. Isabella greeted him at the door with her usual warm smile, the one that now felt like a mask. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. "Busy," he replied simply, stepping past her. Madison was sprawled on the couch, her phone in hand. She barely glanced up as he walked by. "Hey, Dad," she said absently. William didn't respond. He headed straight to his office, closing the door behind him. Isabella knocked a few minutes later. "Everything okay?" "Fine," he called out, his voice steady. "You've been working so much lately," she said, her tone almost concerned. "Don't burn yourself out, all right?" "I won't," William said. She lingered for a moment before walking away. William listened to her footsteps fade down the hall. He opened his laptop, pulling up the lawyer's email, confirming the start of the divorce proceedings. As he read through the details, a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. This was just the beginning. The days that followed were like a game of chess for William. Every move calculated, every action precise. Isabella, wrapped up in her fantasy with Dylan, was too distracted to notice the shifts. Madison, equally oblivious, continued treating William like a walking wallet, confident her future was secure. But William had started to tighten the noose. It began subtly. At breakfast one morning, William sat at the table with his laptop, reviewing the latest email from his lawyer. He glanced at Madison, who was busy complaining about the stress of college applications. "Have you thought about applying for scholarships?" he asked casually, not looking up from the screen. Madison shot him a dismissive look. "Why? Isn't that what the college fund is for?" William sipped his coffee, hiding a smile. "Just a thought. You never know when plans might change. She rolled her eyes. Whatever. I'm not writing another essay unless I have to. It's so annoying. Isabella walked in, holding her phone, her hair still damp from her morning shower. William, don't stress her out about that, she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. We got it covered. William looked up at her, his face unreadable. Of course. Just trying to help. As they continued their mundane morning routines, William's phone buzzed. It was a message from his lawyer. Paternity test kits have been delivered. Instructions attached. That evening, William waited for the perfect opportunity. After dinner, Isabella retreated to the couch, scrolling on her phone with a glass of wine in hand. Madison was upstairs, blasting music while video chatting with her friends. William walked into the living room and sat down next to Isabella. She glanced at him, her smile as rehearsed as ever. "What's up?" she asked, locking her phone and setting it aside. William leaned back, feigning nonchalance. "I was thinking, I haven't been as involved with this pregnancy as I was with Madison's. Maybe I should come to the next doctor's appointment. Be more supportive." Isabella froze for just a fraction of a second. If William hadn't been watching her so closely, he might have missed it. She quickly recovered, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Oh, I'm sure," she said, her voice a little too casual. "It's next week. I'll check the exact time and let you know." William nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Great. I'll make sure to block my calendar." As Isabella picked up her phone and resumed scrolling, William's mind raced. Her hesitation confirmed what he already suspected. She was hiding something. The next day, William waited until Isabella left for one of her supposed errands. He slipped into the master bedroom and found her prenatal vitamins on the nightstand. Carefully, he took the sealed paternity test kit from his office and followed the instructions. A quick swab of Isabella's toothbrush and one from his own mouth, and the first step was complete. He packaged the samples and dropped them off at a shipping center, his hands steady, his resolve unwavering. The results would take a few days, but he already knew the truth deep down. This was just confirmation. In the meantime, William continued gathering evidence. He began recording conversations with Isabella using a small voice recorder he carried in his pocket. He also set up a hidden camera in the kitchen, knowing that was where Isabella and Madison often talked freely. One afternoon, as he pretended to work in his office, he overheard their conversation from the hallway. "So, when are you telling him?" Madison asked, her voice laced with impatience. Isabella sighed. "Soon. I just need to figure out the right time. If I push too fast, he'll get suspicious. I need him to sign everything first." "Ugh, this is taking forever," Madison said. "And what about Dylan? He's not going to wait around forever." "Dylan understands," Isabella replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "He knows I have to be careful. If William finds out before I'm ready, everything falls apart." William clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay quiet. Every word felt like another knife in his back, but he reminded himself that this was all part of the plan. A few days later, William received the results of the paternity test in his email. He opened the file, his heart pounding despite already knowing what it would say. He stared at the words for a moment, his emotions a mix of anger and vindication. The baby wasn't his. Isabella had been lying to him from the start. He forwarded the email to his lawyer with a simple message. "This is the proof we needed." That evening, William sat across from Isabella at the dinner table. Madison had gone out with friends, leaving them alone. Isabella seemed relaxed, chatting about her day as if nothing was amiss. "By the way," William said, interrupting her story, "I got an email from the clinic today." Isabella paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Oh, what about?" "They sent over some routine test results," William said, keeping his tone casual. "Everything looks fine." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "That's good to hear." William leaned forward, looking her in the eye. "Although there was one thing I found interesting." Isabella's smile faltered. "What's that?" William let the silence stretch for a moment before speaking. "The baby isn't mine." The color drained from Isabella's face. Her fork clattered onto her plate. What are you talking about?" "I had a paternity test done," William said, his voice cold. "It's not my child, Isabella." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her eyes darted around the room, as if searching for an escape. William stood, towering over her. How long were you planning to keep this up? Until I signed over everything? Until you and Dylan could ride off into the sunset with my money? Tears welled in Isabella's eyes. William, I can explain. Save it, he snapped. I've heard enough lies. Isabella reached for his arm, but he stepped back. Please just listen to me. No, he said firmly. You've done enough talking. Now it's my turn. Over the next few days, William's actions became more deliberate. He moved his remaining personal assets into protected accounts, ensuring Isabella couldn't touch them. He filed the divorce papers, and with his lawyer's help, secured an emergency injunction to prevent Isabella from accessing his finances. Isabella, now panicking, began trying to reach him during the day, but he ignored her calls and texts. Madison, too, started to sense that something was wrong. Dad, why isn't the college fund showing up in my account? She asked one evening, her tone accusatory. William didn't look up from his laptop. It's been reallocated, he said simply. Reallocated? To what? Madison demanded. That's not your concern, William replied, his voice calm but final. Madison stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. William knew the storm was coming. Isabella and Madison weren't used to being denied, and they would fight back. But he was ready. He had the proof, the plans, and the resolve to see this through. As he sat in his office that night, reviewing his notes and evidence, he felt a sense of clarity. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't consumed by anger or betrayal. Instead, he felt focused. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming his life, and he wouldn't stop until he had everything he deserved. 2 weeks had passed since William had solidified his plan, and now the stage was set for the confrontation. The tension in the house was palpable, though Isabella and Madison were still clueless about just how much William knew. They had noticed he was colder, more distant, but they chalked it up to work stress. Tonight, that ignorance would shatter. The dining table was set, a seemingly ordinary family dinner. William sat across from Isabella, his face expressionless as he sipped water. Madison scrolled through her phone, as usual, barely acknowledging her stepfather. Isabella broke the silence first, forcing a smile. So, William, you've been pretty quiet lately. Is everything okay? William met her gaze and slid an envelope across the table toward her. What's this? She asked, her voice tinged with confusion. Open it, William said, his tone cold and steady. Isabella hesitated, her fingers trembling as she picked up the envelope. Madison glanced up from her phone, curious. Slowly, Isabella pulled out the contents, a stack of glossy photographs. Her eyes widened in horror as she recognized herself and Dylan, her lover, locked in intimate moments, kisses, embraces, even a photo of them entering a hotel together. Her breath hitched. William, I can explain. Explain? William interrupted, his voice rising as he leaned forward. Explain what? Isabella? That you've been screwing another man behind my back? That the baby isn't mine? Or that you were planning to take half of everything I own and ride off into the sunset with him? Madison sat frozen, her mouth slightly open. Mom, what is this? Isabella's face flushed red, her hands shaking as she clutched the photos. William, please. Let's talk about this. Oh, we're talking about it, William said, standing up abruptly. He turned his gaze to Madison, who was now visibly nervous. And you, don't think I forgot about you, Madison. My temporary item. Huh? The clueless loser who's been funding your future? You think I didn't hear? Madison's phone slipped from her hand onto the table with a soft thud. Her face drained of color. I didn't mean it like that, she stammered. It was a joke. Just stupid stuff. Oh, but you meant it, William snapped, cutting her off. Every word. And now you can live with the consequences. He turned to Isabella, whose tears were beginning to spill over. I've canceled Madison's college fund. Every single dollar I set aside for her is gone. Good luck figuring that out, Madison. You can't do that. Madison shrieked, her voice cracking as she stood from her chair. Oh, I can, William said with a grim smile. And I did. William, please. Isabella cried, standing up as well. She tried to reach for his arm, but he stepped back, shaking his head. "No, Isabella. You don't get to beg your way out of this," he said, his voice firm. "Not after everything you've done. The lies. The betrayal. You were planning to leave me with nothing while you and your lover built your dream life on my hard work." Isabella's sobs grew louder. "It wasn't like that. I just save it." William roared, slamming his fist on the table. The plates rattled, and both women flinched. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. "The house? It's in my name. The car? Also mine. The accounts? Emptied. You're leaving here with nothing, Isabella. Nothing." Isabella sank back into her chair, her face buried in her hands. Madison, tears streaming down her face, tried to appeal to him. "William, please. I didn't mean any of it. You've been like a father to me. You can't just throw me out." "Funny," William said, crossing his arms. "I was a father to you. A damn good one. But you didn't care about that, did you? To you, I was just a bank account. Well, guess what? The bank is closed." Madison collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll apologize. Too late for apologies," William said coldly. "You both made your choices. Now you'll deal with the consequences." Isabella tried one last time to reason with him. She stood up and moved toward him, her hands clasped together as she pleaded. "William, I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But please think about the baby. Think about the years we've spent together. Don't throw it all away." William laughed bitterly. "Think about the baby? You mean Dylan's baby? The one you lied to me about?" "Yeah, I've thought about it, Isabella. And I've decided I'm done being a fool." Isabella fell to her knees, clutching his leg as tears streamed down her face. "Please, I'll end it with Dylan. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." William looked down at her, his expression cold and unmoving. "There's nothing to fix, Isabella. You broke it beyond repair. Now, get up. I'm not interested in your theatrics." Reluctantly, Isabella let go, her sobs growing quieter. Madison watched in stunned silence, her face blotchy and red. William looked at both of them, his voice calm but resolute. "You have 1 week to pack your things and leave this house. After that, I'll be filing for divorce, and I'll make sure you get nothing. Not a dime. As for you, Madison, you'd better start figuring out how to pay for college. Maybe Dylan can help you." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Isabella sat slumped in her chair, her face a mess of tears and regret. Madison stared at the table, her hands gripping the edge as if trying to ground herself. William turned and walked toward the door, pausing in the doorway to deliver his final words. "You both thought I was clueless, that I'd never find out, but you underestimated me. Now, you'll see what it feels like to lose everything." With that, he left the room, leaving Isabella and Madison to grapple with the wreckage of their plans. Upstairs, in the privacy of his office, William allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The explosion had been devastating, and the fallout was only just beginning. The aftermath of William's revelation unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Isabella and Madison, once so sure of their plans, now found themselves scrambling to pick up the pieces. William, on the other hand, moved swiftly to ensure their downfall was as complete as possible. The morning after the confrontation, Isabella cornered William in the kitchen, her eyes swollen and red from crying. She dropped to her knees, blocking his path. "William, please," she whispered hoarsely, clasping her hands together. "I know I hurt you. I made a mistake, a huge mistake, but don't do this. Don't ruin our family." William stared down at her, his expression cold and unmoving. "Our family?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Was it a family when you laughed about me behind my back? When you planned a future with Dylan while using me to fund it?" Isabella flinched as if the words were physical blows. "I was stupid," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't think things through. I'll end it with Dylan. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me like this." William stepped around her, grabbing his coffee mug from the counter. "You didn't think things through when you lied about the baby's father. You didn't think things through when you called me a loser. Why should I think things through for you now? Isabella broke down completely, her sobs echoing in the empty kitchen. Madison appeared in the doorway, her face pale. William, Madison said hesitantly, her voice uncharacteristically soft. Please. I know I was wrong. I know what I said hurt you, but you've been like a dad to me. Don't punish me for my mistakes. William turned to her, his eyes narrowing. Like a dad? That's rich, coming from someone who called me her temporary ATM. You didn't see me as a dad when you were plotting with your mom, Madison. You saw me as a bank. Well, guess what? The bank is closed. Madison's lip quivered, and she turned away, unable to meet his gaze. The divorce process was swift, clinical, and brutal. William's lawyer was ruthless, armed with the mountain of evidence William had gathered. Isabella didn't stand a chance. At the final hearing, the judge reviewed the financial records, text messages, and photos William had submitted. The verdict was clear. Isabella would leave the marriage with nothing. The house, the car, and the savings all went to William. As they exited the courtroom, Isabella tried one last time to appeal to him. William, please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? William didn't stop walking. That's not my problem anymore, Isabella. Maybe you should ask Dylan. He seemed pretty eager to start a life with you. Isabella stared after him, her face a mask of despair. Isabella moved in with Dylan shortly after the divorce, but it wasn't the dream life she had envisioned. Dylan had seemed charming and attentive when they were sneaking around behind William's back, but now that the reality of her pregnancy loomed large, his mask began to slip. The first sign came when Dylan started staying out late, offering vague excuses about work or meeting friends. Isabella, heavily pregnant and emotionally drained, tried to ignore the warning signs. One night, as she sat alone on the couch in their tiny apartment, Dylan walked in, reeking of alcohol. Where have you been? Isabella asked, her voice tense. Out, Dylan said curtly, tossing his jacket onto a chair. Out where? You said you'd help me set up the nursery tonight. Dylan scoffed, grabbing a beer from the fridge. Nursery? Isabella, we're barely making rent. You think I have money to waste on a damn nursery? Isabella's eyes welled up with tears. You said we'd do this together. You promised. Yeah, well, maybe I didn't think it through, Dylan snapped, cutting her off. You're the one who wanted this kid, Isabella. Don't expect me to play house with you just because your ex kicked you out. The words hit Isabella like a punch to the gut. For the first time, she realized just how badly she had miscalculated. Dylan wasn't a partner. He was a selfish, irresponsible man who had no intention of stepping up. Madison fared no better. With her college fund wiped out and no inheritance to rely on, she was forced to face a harsh reality. Gone were the days of leisurely shopping trips and carefree weekends. Now, she worked 2 part-time jobs, one at a coffee shop and another at a retail store, just to make ends meet. One evening, as she trudged home after a double shift, her phone buzzed with a message from a friend. Party tonight at Lisa's. You coming? Madison stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She wanted to say yes, to escape her miserable reality for just one night, but she couldn't afford it. Not the gas to get there, not the drinks, not even the time away from studying for her community college classes. Can't. Busy, she typed back, her chest tightening with frustration. As she unlocked the door to the tiny apartment she now shared with Isabella, she found her mother sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a pile of unpaid bills. Another rejection letter, Isabella said quietly, holding up a crumpled piece of paper. For a job I'm overqualified for. Madison dropped her bag on the floor and sank into a chair across from her. Maybe we should have thought this through, she muttered bitterly. Isabella shot her a sharp look. Don't start with me, Madison. I don't need a lecture right now. Madison sighed, rubbing her temples. I'm just saying, we had a good thing with William. And we screwed it up. Isabella didn't respond. She simply pushed the bills aside and rested her head in her hands, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. Meanwhile, William was thriving. Free from the toxic environment Isabella and Madison had created, he focused on rebuilding his life. He He reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and even started dating again. One evening, as he sat on the patio of his newly purchased home, his phone buzzed with a message from his lawyer. Isabella's filed for child support. Don't worry, we'll fight it. William smirked, setting the phone down. He wasn't worried. With the evidence he had, there was no chance he'd be held responsible for Dylan's child. He leaned back in his chair, sipping a glass of whiskey as he watched the sunset. For the first time in years, he felt truly free. A month later, Isabella received a letter in the mail. She opened it with trembling hands, dreading yet another bill. Instead, it was a notice from the court. Her request for child support had been denied. Her shoulders slumped as she sank into a chair. Across the room, Madison glanced up from her laptop. "What is it now?" Madison asked. "William," Isabella said quietly. "You won't have to pay a dime for the baby." Madison shook her head in disbelief. "How does he always come out on top?" Isabella didn't answer. She simply stared at the letter, her mind replaying every choice she had made that led her to this moment. For the first time, she realized that the life she had destroyed wasn't just William's. It was her own. The first few weeks after the divorce were like a detox for William. The house was quiet, devoid of Isabella's disapproving sighs or Madison's incessant complaints. At first, the silence felt oppressive, but as time passed, William began to embrace it. For the first time in years, he could hear himself think. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the window of his new apartment, William sat at the dining table sipping coffee. The space was smaller, but it was his, and that made all the difference. "Time to move forward," he said to himself. William threw himself into his work, taking on new projects and mentoring younger employees. His newfound focus didn't go unnoticed. "William, you've been killing it lately," his boss said during a one-on-one meeting. "I've got an opportunity for you, head of the new project division. It's a big responsibility, but I think you're ready." William smiled, feeling a sense of pride he hadn't experienced in years. "I'm ready," he replied. The promotion brought a higher salary and a chance to travel, something he'd always dreamed of but had put on hold for Isabella and Madison. Over the next few months, William found himself in cities he'd only read about: Tokyo, Rome, Cape Town. Each trip was a reminder of how much life there was beyond the confines of his old marriage. It was on a crisp fall afternoon, during one of his travels, that William met Sophia. He was sitting in a quaint cafe in Florence, sipping espresso and sketching a rough outline of a presentation. "Excuse me," a soft voice said, breaking his concentration. William looked up to see a woman standing beside his table, holding a book and a cup of coffee. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her warm smile was disarming. "Do you mind if I sit here? The other tables are full," she said. "Of course," William replied, gesturing to the chair across from him. They exchanged pleasantries, and William learned that Sophia was an art historian visiting Florence for research. As the conversation flowed, William found himself laughing, a genuine, unforced laugh he hadn't felt in years. When Sophia noticed his sketches, her eyes lit up. "You have an eye for design. Are you an artist?" "Not quite," William said, chuckling. "I work in product development, but I guess creativity is part of the job." Sophia nodded. "Well, it's impressive. You should do it more often." By the time they parted ways, William had her number. For the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of something he thought he'd lost forever: hope. Over the next few months, William and Sophia grew closer. Their relationship wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was slow and steady, built on long conversations, shared meals, and mutual respect. On one of their early dates, they walked through a local park, leaves crunching beneath their feet. "I've got to be honest," William said, pausing near a bench. "I've been through a lot in the past year. I'm not sure if I'm ready to dive into something serious." Sophia smiled softly. "I understand. Trust takes time. I'm not in a rush." Her patience and understanding were like a balm to William's wounded heart. Slowly, he began to let his guard down. Despite their growing bond, William struggled with lingering doubts. One evening, as they cooked dinner together in his apartment, he found himself on edge. William, Sophia said gently, setting down a knife. You've been quiet all night. Is something bothering you? William hesitated, leaning against the counter. It's not you, he said finally. It's me. After everything I went through with Isabella, it's hard not to expect the worst. Sophia stepped closer, her expression serious but kind. I'm not her, William. I'm not perfect, but I believe in honesty. If I ever have a problem, I'll tell you. And if you ever feel unsure about me, promise me you'll talk to me instead of letting it fester. William nodded, her words resonating deeply. For the first time, he felt like he had a partner who would stand beside him, not take advantage of him. As the months turned into a year, William and Sophia's relationship continued to flourish. They didn't just share laughter and affection. They supported each other through challenges. When William faced a particularly stressful deadline at work, Sophia surprised him with a weekend getaway to a cabin in the mountains. You work so hard, she said as they sat by the fire. You deserve a break. William smiled, taking her hand. I didn't realize how much I needed this. Thank you. One evening, while sorting through old boxes, William stumbled upon a photo of himself, Isabella, and Madison from years ago. For a moment, he felt a pang of sadness, not for losing them, but for the man he used to be. Sophia noticed his expression and walked over. Old memories? William nodded, holding up the photo. Yeah, it's strange. I don't miss them, but I do miss the person I was before everything went wrong. Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder. You didn't lose him, William. You just had to bury him for a while. But I think he's coming back. William smiled, realizing she was right. 1 year after meeting Sophia, William invited her to a dinner at his favorite restaurant. As they sat on the patio, the city lights twinkling in the distance, William took her hand. I never thought I'd find someone like you, he said. You've shown me what love is supposed to feel like, honest, supportive, and real. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. And you've shown me what it means to have a true partner. William took a deep breath. I want to keep building this with you. Not just for today or tomorrow, but for the future. Will you move in with me? Sophia smiled, her answer immediate. Yes. For the first time in years, William felt at peace. Isabella and Madison's betrayal had shattered his world, but from the ruins, he had built something stronger, something real. And this time, he knew he wouldn't let it slip away. The crisp morning air filtered through the slightly open window as William sat at his desk, sorting through the week's mail. Bills, advertisements, and a single envelope with no return address caught his attention. The handwriting on the front was hurried, almost shaky. His curiosity piqued. William carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. As he unfolded the paper, his eyes immediately caught the signature at the bottom. Isabella. William, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, and I wouldn't blame you if you threw this letter away. But I don't have anywhere else to turn. Dylan is gone. He walked out on me a year ago after our son was born. He didn't even bother to fight for custody. He just left us. I thought I could manage on my own, but everything has fallen apart. I can barely make rent, and the bills are piling up. Madison blames me for everything. She refuses to speak to me and hasn't been home in months. I'm alone, William. Completely alone. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you for help. Not for me, but for my son. He's innocent in all of this. Please, William. If there's anything left of the man I once knew, help me. Isabella. William leaned back in his chair, the letter dangling from his fingers. His first instinct was anger. The nerve of her, after everything she had done, to ask him for help now. But as the seconds ticked by, anger gave way to something colder. Indifference. He folded the letter carefully and placed it on his desk. Well, he muttered to himself, karma works faster than I expected. For a moment, William's mind drifted back to the life he once had with Isabella and Madison. The smiles, the laughter, the shared dreams. All of it felt like a distant memory now, warped by the betrayal he'd uncovered. He remembered the night he overheard them, the sting of their words. How clueless can one man be? Madison had said. Our temporary ATM. Isabella's laughter still echoed faintly in his mind. The pain had once consumed him, driving him to exact revenge. But that man, the one who had been broken and angry, was gone now. William had moved on, and he had no intention of revisiting the wreckage they had created. William walked out of his home office and into the living room, where Sophia sat on the floor with her 3-year-old daughter, Mia. The little girl was giggling as Sophia attempted to build a block tower that Mia gleefully knocked over every time it reached 3 levels. "Daddy!" Mia squealed when she noticed William. She scrambled to her feet and ran toward him, arms outstretched. William scooped her up, planting a kiss on her forehead. "What's going on here? Are you sabotaging Mommy's tower again?" Sophia looked up with a mock expression of defeat. "I'm starting to think she's doing it on purpose." Mia grinned mischievously. "It's funny." William chuckled, setting Mia down. He caught Sophia's eye and smiled. She gave him a knowing look, her gaze filled with warmth and understanding. "Everything okay?" she asked as he settled onto the couch. "Yeah," William said, pulling her close. "Just dealing with some old ghosts. Nothing worth worrying about." Sophia tilted her head. "Do you want to talk about it?" William shook his head. "Not really. It's just a reminder of how far we've come." He glanced at Mia, now happily stacking blocks again. "Of how lucky I am." Across town, Isabella sat on a worn-out couch in her dimly lit apartment. The walls were bare, save for a few crooked picture frames holding photos of her son, Liam. The boy sat at the kitchen table, scribbling on a piece of paper with crayons, oblivious to the tension radiating from his mother. Isabella stared at her phone, willing it to buzz with a response from William. Days had passed since she sent the letter, and the silence was deafening. She had reached out to Dylan again, but his number was disconnected. The man who had promised her a dream life had disappeared without a trace, leaving her to shoulder the burden of their child alone. Madison, too, was nowhere to be found. The last time they spoke, it had been a shouting match. "You ruined everything, Mom," Madison had screamed. "You're the reason we're in this mess. You destroyed our lives." The words cut deep, and Isabella hadn't been able to argue. She had destroyed their lives. Her own selfishness, her lies, her betrayal had led them here. Meanwhile, Madison was scraping by, working 2 part-time jobs and sharing a cramped apartment with 3 roommates. She scrolled through her social media feed during her lunch break, pausing when she saw a photo of William. He was standing on a beach, holding a little girl in his arms. Beside him was a woman with a radiant smile. They looked happy, peaceful. Madison felt a pang of regret. She had always assumed William would be the one left broken after everything. But he wasn't broken. He had moved on and built a better life for himself. Madison closed the app and buried her face in her hands. She was tired of running, tired of the bitterness that had consumed her. For the first time, she wondered if it was too late to make amends. That evening, as William prepared to tuck Mia into bed, Sophia approached him with a cup of tea. "Did the old ghosts bring back any new thoughts?" she asked, handing him the cup. William hesitated, then nodded. "Isabella sent me a letter. She's asking for help." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "What are you going to do?" William sighed. "Nothing. I've already given her more than she deserved. She made her choices, and now she has to live with them. I've moved on, and I'm not about to let her pull me back into her mess." Sophia nodded. "Good. You've built a beautiful life, William. Don't let her take that from you." William smiled and kissed her on the forehead. "I won't." As William sat by Mia's bedside, reading her favorite story, he felt a profound sense of contentment. The journey to this point hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. He had learned to let go of the past and embrace the future. Meanwhile, Isabella sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone, waiting for a response that would never come. Madison wrestled with her guilt and anger, unsure if she had the strength to reach out. But William no longer cared. Their choices had led them to their downfall, and this had brought him to a place of peace and happiness. For the first time in years, William knew he was exactly where he was meant to be.